Welcome. Thanks for joining us this week here at Heart of a Father. Once again, we're just taking time to enjoy some fellowship with a good friend and enjoy Jesus. And from this place of just sitting in his presence, and as we try to lean in and listen to him, that's where we see lasting fruit take place. And we continue to invite you into that journey, into that process in your own life. And I'm here with my good friend Jared Scholz. And Jared, we've been talking about making disciples, a number of things, your own personal journey. But last week, really loved the fact that you were leaning in to the truth that God's called all of us to make disciples. And for you guys, a simple definition, helping people follow Jesus in real time. It takes relationship, it takes leaning in. And so when you launched Greenhouse Church back 13 years ago or so, that was really your passion. And how can we do this well in this context here in Lawrence, Kansas? So just lean in again this week into that as far as what was the vision behind that? How did that begin to flesh out?
Yeah, that's a great question. We didn't know, but we couldn't not try.
That's so good, even that.
Yeah. We just felt like the Lord said, "Here's your next step," and so we just started somewhere, So I think with every decision, especially at the top of the church, is, will this frustrate the mission of making disciples? If so, we don't want to do it. And then sort of follow the fruit. Where are you seeing fruit, and how can we get out of the way of that happening, and where can we sort of reinforce whatever made that happen? How can we reproduce that thing that is happening? And so those years were wild, where we had all of our neighborhood churches, which are small groups, eating, telling stories from the Bible, and praying for one another. That's what our neighborhood churches do. In those early years, half of our people were doing that in houses on a Sunday morning. And then the other half was doing preaching, teaching, kids ministry, church, sort of a normal-esque church thing. And then every week they would rotate. So if you were doing the preaching thing, if you were in kids ministry and at the church building or whatever, then you were in your neighborhood church the next week. So we kind of planted two churches at the same time, which I would never recommend to anyone. It's very, very, very difficult to do. And so for us, our main conviction was people don't have time for small groups. And so we wanted to clear up Sunday morning time frame for people to do it. And by God's grace, there were more people in our small groups than were a part of our church, pretty much all the way up until COVID.
Wow.
So that always felt good, It always felt like, all right, that's really cool. And so lots of relationship, eating food, lots of opportunities for people to stretch and grow. So in our neighborhood church right now, this semester, there's been a different person telling the story from the Bible every week. There's been a different person leading prayer every week. There's been a different person hanging out with overseeing the kids every week, and a different person leading the discussion every week.
Wow.
That's intentional, because like we discussed a few weeks ago, the weight of leadership is actually good for us.
Yes.
There's some preacher who says, like, trucks are easiest to steer if you load them up. An empty truck you can hardly keep on the road. And so I think spiritually we kind of noticed that. And we've had so many beautiful things where it's like, hey, I'm telling this story and I need some help trying to even understand what's happening in the story. Another opportunity for discipleship. Oh, I'm scared to lead prayer. I've only been a Christian a year. I don't even talk right. Another opportunity for discipleship. So we just tried to pack as many of those sorts of moments into what our church was. And so I think the other part of this is we've got a lot of language about how disciples grow. And one snippet of that would be we talk about phrases from the stage. So a spiritual infant might say, "Hey man, aren't all religions about the same?" A spiritual parent is gonna say something like, "Hey, group was awesome last night. The food burned and only half the people showed up, but Bob got vulnerable." So, kind of going back to what we talked about a few weeks ago as well, is about cynicism and the cup half full, half empty. If you have a radar for that's a discipleship moment, that's a discipleship moment, that's a discipleship moment, then you go to the event, and someone goes, "How was small group?" And they go, "Oh, it was terrible. The food was burnt and only half the people showed up." The spiritual parent in the room goes, "It was amazing. Yeah, the food burnt and half the people showed up, but vulnerability happened." And so, training our people to hear phrases from the stage, to go, "What? This person used to primarily say like, 'I'm so glad I found this church. It's been so good for me.' And now they're saying, 'I'm so glad to be a part of this church because we get to provide X for Sammy who walked in the door yesterday.'" So they start moving from me-centric to other-centric, and then they move to, "Hey, I'm here to help do a ministry," and then they move to, "Man, this is amazing. It's not about me, and I do get to do ministry, but the real deal is I get to help someone follow Jesus in real time." Now we're looking at a spiritual parent. So I think our strategy has been, how many people can we train to see this way? And that's been the main thrust of our church. How many people can we get to think through, I'm here to make disciples? And it transforms families. It transforms churches. It transforms small groups. It transforms everything.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you're very familiar with it. You see things on the inside out. Most of us, I mean, I've had the privilege of from a distance walking with you and seeing the journey and process and being excited and being like you going, "Okay, I hope this works. I love the heart of what they're doing." So tell me a little bit more when you say the concept of neighborhood church. I think you spelled it out well. You were doing it on Sunday mornings. Now some of those aren't on Sunday mornings, it sounds like.
Right.
But at the time, and you have several, talk really what that looks like fleshed out, because though there are many places in this church, like we talked about, I think even off camera, that maybe on camera some, that every dynamic, large church, small church, you're looking through that discipleship lens.
Amen. Yeah.
So I think you guys are being intentional and probably effective in that. But I think one model, and we can maybe look at others, is in that neighborhood church, because I think it's a very practical way to give an example of how different people can be given a leadership opportunity. You touched on that, but just take us back through that with a little more intentionality.
Yeah.
What does that look like when you get together?
Yeah, great. So a neighborhood church is going to eat together, story, and pray. And so a few places to play. There's always opportunities to bring food. We've even had unbelievers who are like, "Hey, I'm good at making menus." I feel like that's important. I had a profound moment one time talking to a doctor in a church, and the basic thing I came away with was, he feels very confident in every setting except for church. He comes in, he sits down, he shuts up, he writes his tithe check. And I thought, no, that's not what the kingdom's supposed to be. He's supposed to be in the game of making disciples. And so giving people the opportunity to feel successful or needed or wanted or like they're contributing, food is one of those. And like we said, telling stories from the Bible and leading out in some of the other spiritual things as well. But so we always want some sort of like baseline. You don't have to have a real biblical vocabulary. It's that we want to get you in the game as fast as possible. So So we do. We make full meals. You know, we contribute. Everyone contributes, and we bring full meals. And then right now we have about 90 stories. So one semester we'll do Old Testament stories. Then we'll break, and then the next semester we'll do New Testament stories. Then the next semester we pick up where we left off on the Old Testament stories,
Okay.
etc. So we'll walk through those. Those are stories that we've handpicked. You know, we used a few books early on, but they were only about 52 stories, and kind of wanted to do that. So we just build those stories out, and so if you were going to lead the story next week, we'd tell you what the text was, and then we'd send you a PDF, and the PDF says, hey, here's a possible hook that you want people thinking about. Does anyone have a story about being betrayed? Because today we're going to deal with a story about someone being betrayed. So here's a possible hook you could use. Great. Here's the backstory of what happened in the last few weeks, or, you know, if you didn't cover those exact things, here's what's kind of happening. So a background, a hook, something like that. And then a shortened, condensed version of the story to pretty much memorize, definitely to say with notes, almost never reading. That would be the exception to the rule, is reading it. So they study for that, and then in that PDF too would be, hey, here's some questions after the time of telling the story, and we move those questions from head, heart, hands. So, you know, what was so and so's name? Where did they live? How many kids did they have? Then what happened, etc. Head stuff, and then heart stuff. Man, what do you think was going on, you know, in the room? What do you think this person's heart was doing? How do you feel about the story, etc. And then what do we want to do about it? So very simple, just very simple stuff. And so we lead out in that, and then it's time of prayer. And, you know, depending on the story, sometimes not terribly connected. You know, you might just shut it down and then go, all right, let's pray, you know. And sometimes, rarely in ours do we do like prayer request. I think we probably do it a little more than we used to, but, you know, something like, hey, we're going to pray for this nation, or let's pray about betrayal, or if someone really is going, you know, someone had a miscarriage, let's pray over that. So just a time of prayer, and someone else is leading that. And that too is another place where people stretch. That's actually the hardest place. I've been surprised by that over the years, that people would rather try and memorize, you know, Joseph's entire life than they would to lead out in prayer. And I think you'll find that all over, you know. The network we're a part of, we talk about these sorts of things, and by and large, the hardest thing, prayer, which tells you probably what is the most potent weapon we have,
Yeah.
because it's the most uncomfortable, and the enemy wants to squash it so much. So that's about an hour and a half.
Okay.
You know, with multiple leaders, the whole family. We don't do, you know, it's not typical to have someone doing childcare offsite or something like that. So that is what a neighborhood church is. Now we've got other things that we do, Bible studies, have rooms, other things that we do that are small groups, you know, study based. But that's the main thing for us, is the whole family, and that too is intentional. You know, we felt and still feel we need the family of God to look like the family of God. So we need young people, we need old people, we need people from all different walks of life. You know, if you only hang out with moms of toddlers, they're all of their hair is on fire. You know, I don't know how they ever have any sort of meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
But then you get granny in the room to hold the baby. You know, or you get the parent of the teenager who's like, I've been there. It's going to get better.
Yeah.
There's something really powerful about that. The only problem with that is people don't know they need that. Typically people, I think we've found is, without much coaching, people want affinity groups that are into the same things they're into. And sometimes your stage of life can really blind you. You know, tell you what I need is I need someone who's just like me. And so I think those are some of the intentional things that we've used to go, let's try and create the best scenario for the greatest discipleship going forward.
Well, thank you, Jared. That's so rich that you've given us some really practical things, and I know there again you're not prescribing that this is the way, but for you it's been a very intentional way of going about making disciples, and really just giving people opportunities and calling them up and speaking life into them. You can do this, and you know, stretching them, giving them that leadership we've been talking about, which is where they're going to grow. And so, once again, thank you for joining us this week, and hopefully for you, and somewhere in that you were challenged, like, wow. And maybe, you know, if you're already like, oh yeah, I've got this, well, there again, maybe we all need to humble ourselves a little bit, but just how do we make disciples? How do we help people take the next step in following Jesus? And what does that look like practically in your situation? Jared gave us some different things which aren't magic in themselves, but there's some biblical principles there, just slowing down to enjoy a meal together, taking the time to embrace the word where you're able to tell the story, even if you stutter and stammer a little bit in the process. Going outside your comfort zone in your own prayer life, where you begin to say, well, this talking with Jesus thing, what's that look like? And I'm going to give it a try even in front of others, and be humble enough to try that. So choose one of those this week. Begin to say what that would look like in your own situation. And hope to see you next week.